And I'd actually like to call on Mike McCormick just to say some opening words of thanks and welcome to everybody, and then we can get started with the actual presentation.
Great, thank you, Adira and Heather. So hello and good afternoon or evening, depending on where you're located. My name's Michael McCormick, and I, along with two fabulous colleagues, Mary Bocage and Kathy Woods, co-chair the National Patient Council for CanSOLVE CKD. And on behalf of the over 30 members of the Patient Council, I would like to welcome our funding partners in the West. And thank you. Thank you for your contribution, which enables the CanSOLVE network to run its 18 projects and will improve the lives of the many Canadians and their families who are impacted by chronic kidney disease. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy our presentation.
Thanks, Mike. So this is the second ever, or well, just 2.5 funders forum. And so we had the first one by VideoCon, and then we had another one at the CSN meeting. And now this is essentially the third or the second, depending on how you're counting. And we do have a set of slides that we would like to share with you, and who's on the line includes many of our funding partners, foundations, industry partners, as well as universities and institutions, as well as the individuals involved in CanSOLVE CKD. And although, Mike, it was a great suggestion, I think that in the interest of time, I will not do a roll call. We do have a good understanding of who said they could come. We'll maybe try and go through the presentation and then have a lot of opportunity for questions, etc. Can everybody hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Great, thank you. So again, as I said, thank you to all of you, and maybe Graham, I'll get you to put up the slides. So now, thank goodness you won't see me, but you'll just see the slides. It's always better than me looking at myself. So thanks to all of you, as Mike said, and thank you to all of our funding partners. And this is perhaps a very good visual that helps us to really appreciate the totality of all the different kinds of partners that we have. Alberta Health Services, Amgen, the Approach Database, various renal agencies in different provinces, as well as foundations from hospitals. I won't name them all here, but I think you get the idea. And of course, our very important Kidney Foundation of Canada partnership, which really helps us to move the entire enterprise forward. Next. So here we are sort of at the beginning of year 3. We want to reflect on year 2. And in year 1, we really built the foundation, got a lot of people involved and organized. And over this last year, we've really taken a number of steps in terms of achieving some of our goals of changing the culture and the way that we do not just kidney research business in Canada, but the care of patients with kidney disease and for kidney disease. And next slide. Just to remind you that in the first year, we designed and had to execute a governance model. We were recruiting the different patient partners and committee members, and really we're getting the foundations established with a core operations team, and really learning, all of us, about patient-oriented research and training and getting ourselves up to speed. For those of you that haven't heard this before, it took a lot of time to develop and sign all the institutional funding agreements. That continues to always be a problem with research. And to quote Mike McCormick, if it's a usual problem, why haven't we fixed it? Mike, my pledge to you is that somewhere in this 5 years, we will fix that it will not be a usual problem. Next slide. So over this last year, I think we've done a lot of really amazing things. We've launched the Research Operations Committee so that we've really been able to have a deep dive into some of the details regarding the execution of the research projects, from their nascent description and protocols to a more operational, foundational way to get things done. We've bolstered the leadership capacity by adding to both the physician researcher leadership as well as the patient and IPERC leadership, a number of new faces. We've grown all of the various committees. We are in the process of developing the 5-module curriculum, including the Indigenous learning pathway, which is a first in kind, never mind a first in Canada. We have now signed all of those institutional agreements. Probably more importantly, we actually are moving the research agenda forward with, at last count, 11 publications in 2017-18.
Make sure nobody's in the waiting room before we move on.
Pause while we check that no one's in the waiting room, apparently.
Oh, Gloria, all right.
Okay. Look at that dexterity with which you maneuver. Graham, go, Graham, go. Great. So just to give you a feel for how what things have changed over the last 2 years, we've gone from 29 to 35 patient council members. Next slide. We have had a check-in meeting with every single project, all 18 of them, to figure out what the successes and challenges are in each of those. And we have patient partners as members of each of the committees in the network's governance structure, including the Research Operations Committee, and on an associated group in terms of Crescent, which is our curriculum training group for trainees. We've actually had patient presentations and presence at the last 3 Crescent meetings, which is a very big change. We have empowered our patients to serve as ambassadors in the network and at various meetings, both directly related to CanSOLVE within the Canadian Society of Nephrology, as well as in national and regional meetings. We've actually had a presence, and in fact, some people have been asked to speak at non-kidney related events that have to do with patient engagement, including being on a council, a panel at the respiratory research meeting that was held in Vancouver, where they wanted to understand how we were doing patient engagement, because that's also new to the respiratory community. So people are hearing about us a lot. Next slide. We have a number of patient engagement tools that have been developed. We have tips for collaboration. We have a toolkit for project leads based on a need expressed, and a glossary of terms. And this sounds so simple, but actually getting this right so that people can really understand what we're talking about and how to use specific words is really something very important. Next slide. We have participated in and held foundations and patient-oriented research training workshops, and 90 at last count, and I believe 10 more are registered for the one in September. So that would be almost 100 different network members have received foundational training. As I mentioned before, there is the Wabishki Bishko Scanch, which translates as a white horse, 5-part training curriculum designed by, with, and for our Indigenous partners, looking at practical tools, how to tell stories and telling stories with impact, how we enhance the partnerships with Indigenous communities, and how we have an integrated approach to knowledge translation. So that's been due to a lot of very hard, diligent work, and I believe that will be presented at the upcoming CIHR workshop in November. We've added Sophia Ahmed as our sex and gender lead, Jim Scully, who's on the call, as part of our leadership team, and Evelyn, Dr. Evelyn Voyager is our elder advisor, specifically attached to CanSOLVE CKD, which I think is really rounds out the team nicely. As I said, all the funding agreements have been completed, the projects are moving, and we've published in a number of different journals, including New England Journal, British Medical Journal, Open, Diabetologica, American Journal of Kidney Disease, and our own Canadian Journal of Kidney Health and Disease. On the last one, we actually have obtained at least 2 to 5 waivers per year, so it doesn't cost us anything to submit to those groups, as long as they're of appropriate caliber and still go through a peer review process. So I think that's a really important advance and a way to spread in open publication without a cost to the network, the work that's getting done. We have, in the new way of the world, developed visual abstracts and new knowledge translation tools so that we can share our research outcomes in a way that people are able to understand it better. As I've told many of you, the researchers' little secret is we don't always understand what we're saying to each other. We just use all these fancy words and think that everyone knows what we're talking about. But really, when you have to distill it down to clear pictures, clear understanding of what's the purpose of the project is and what the findings are, it really is very humbling. So these are wonderful tools that have been developed in combination with our knowledge translation group, as well as Graham and the communications team. So I encourage all of you to go to our website and have a look at those. Selena Alou has been leading a lot of this, and that's a shout out to her as well. IPERC, our Indigenous Peoples Engagement and Research Council, is creating a culturally safe space for Indigenous people to take part in research, and we have ongoing bi-directional learning. So that's been a wonderful enrichment to the network. We've had sharing circles, sharing of songs and dances, blanket ceremonies, smudging, and tobacco offerings. And many of you on the phone call have participated in this. And we hosted a regional funders forum under Jim Scully's leadership, and with many of the people that you see in that picture, in Toronto in April, and then again in Vancouver during the CSN. And these are places where people can do a little bit more of a deep dive into understanding the projects that are being done and sort of see where your investments are going. And that's been a very enriching experience, as well as opening other possibilities with local investors, as well as understanding of the implications of the research getting done. We make it to a lot of places out there, so you can YouTube us and you can find us on various networks. And I think these are all really important. And I think that's thanks to Graham and his team, as well as Selena and the KT group. But there's a lot of tweeting and whatever else one does. But it's a very visible network. It doesn't take very much. We've had a lot of interest from other countries who are interested in this. There is the Song Initiative, which is out of Australia, that many of you will know about, which is looking at outcomes, patient-relevant outcomes in nephrology. But the patient engagement there is on a different level than what we've accomplished. And I know that many people there are quite excited about what we're doing here. So that's thanks to the existence of the network. And there are a number of ways that investigators and new researchers have leveraged the network by making sure that it's very sustainable and using CanSOLVE as a nidus. A number of different studies have actually written us into their grants and been successful. So ATTEMPT trial is an innovative clinical trials grant. There is a SPORE initiative clinical trials grant to look at registration for deceased organ donation in family physician offices. And BRIDGE is a grant that's a partnership between our Indigenous communities and the transplanters in British Columbia, looking at a way to enhance and customize the transplant donation for living donors in communities that was awarded a grant with a partner with Alyssa Anu and Jag Gill. We have the Indigenous Learning Pathway, which I told you about before, which was co-developed with Diabetes Action Canada, fondly known as DAC. We've co-hosted the research training with ChildBright, and we are participating in the National SPORE Task Force looking at standardizing patient partner compensation. Jim, I'm going to turn it over to you, and you'll just have to tell Graham when you want him to change the slides, but just thought you could, just for a change of voice and pace, I'd ask you to maybe share the financial highlights with the group on the phone.
Be delighted, Adira, and it's been a privilege to engage with your team and to work with the CanSOLVE CKD initiative. This pie chart represents the total research budget for the 18 projects and core infrastructure of the CanSOLVE CKD program. It's important to realize that the SPORE program, originally launched by the Canadian Institutes of Health Research, established a one-to-one partnership in which every dollar from CIHR was to be matched by a partnership dollar. And each program, each SPORE network was funded to the level of $12.5 million. What is striking, of course, in this pie chart is that the CanSOLVE CKD investigator teams across the country were energized, and their patient partners were energized, and a total budget that exceeds $40 million was reached. The majority, the 2/3 of that money, represents money that was committed by people based on partnerships established across the nation. This includes, of course, the pie chart shows in the green the CIHR SPORE funding. There are other CIHR funds that are shown in the light green to clockwise from this portion of the pie grant. This represents leveraged projects that are funded by other CIHR programs, which are codependent on the CanSOLVE network. The partner funding in kind has bridged a number of agencies across the country and has played an important role, particularly in British Columbia and Alberta and in Manitoba. And importantly, partner funding cash, which is the largest aspect of the pie chart, has played a considerable role in the ability to establish the programs and move them forward. Next slide, please, Graham. This represents a spectrum, if you like, of the partner funding outside of CIHR's money that includes both cash and in-kind contribution. It spans quite a spectrum. On the left-hand side are represented actually a private and substantial private donation, and on the right-hand side, the purple represents the health research funding organizations and provincial renal programs. In between, you can see that charitable foundations and other research foundations have partnered, including the Juvenile Diabetes Foundation, and this represents a significant partnership with CIHR and with CanSOLVE CKD. It's important to note that, again, as I mentioned, that the partnership funding exceeds the level of the CIHR funding by almost twofold. Next slide, please, Grant. This financial highlight slide shows where we sit with spending these dollars that everyone has worked so hard to secure. And on the left-hand side of this bar diagram in the hatched green,
James.
That sounded like a bird. That sounded like a bird singing our praise. Coming through clearly?
Do you want to mute? No, something. Maybe if you want to call in on your phone and leave your screen up, or Graham, what should he do?
Have I lost the connection?
No, there you are. Now it's fine. No noise. Keep going. Terrific.
Right. I thought that might have been a bird singing our praises. This bar diagram shows the planned spending in year two. On the left-hand side of the bar is actually in the hatched green represents actual expenditures, and on the right-hand side represents unspent funds. Although on first glance this seems a little bit concerning, it actually represents one of the challenges that emerged in the CanSOLVE CKD program, and I think also was seen in other SPORE programs, and that was the need to establish institutional contracts across the country. This was a daunting process that consumed a lot of administrative effort, and in fact, we're actually successfully, we've reached a point where in fact these contracts are in place and we expect to go forward. So the expectation is that year three actual expenditures will match planned expenditures. One of the advantages of CIHR and having a carry forward fund is that CIHR will allow the networks to continue to use the resources they've gathered until March 31st, 2022. That means we can extend the life, if you like, of CanSOLVE CKD in the first phase through to 2022 and access these funds so that the unspent forward funds will be used to fund activities in 2021 and 22. We anticipate it going forward, now that all of the research projects and contracts are in place, that the funding will reach, the actual expenditures will reach the anticipated and planned expenditures. Graham, the next slide, please. This depicts some of the same information somewhat differently. The left-hand circle represents the overall budget and overall funding that was really represented in the bar graph previously, and shows that actual spending versus planned spending of a rate of 28%. This was spread across two categories, that is the cash spending, which is shown in the middle at 25%, and more dependence upon in-kind support. So this is a more detailed background of actual spending versus planned spending. And again, we expect in the next year, or year 3, to go full circle with actual and planned spending. Graham, could I have the next slide, please? This pie chart actually represents where the monies are being spent currently, and I think we're proud to be able to show in the purple that over 60% of funds are directed to the support of the research initiatives across the 18 specific programs within CanSOLVE. If you go to the left of that, the yellow actually is shown as supplies, materials, and services. This includes important initiatives in knowledge translation and important initiatives in patient engagement strategies, which are key elements of CanSOLVE CKD and have been part of the learning curve of all of the investigators involved in the 18 projects. Stakeholder engagement, shown in the green slice on the pie chart, is a particularly unique component of CanSOLVE CKD, and Adira spoke earlier of changing really the way in which we approach research, and engaging stakeholders, patients, and patient partners has been a key part, and actually a rewarding part of the CanSOLVE CKD program. And remarkably, only 11% of the funding that we receive goes to support the management and administration of this network. And this is a brand new initiative that is national in scope and is a considerable endeavor, we think, done very efficiently by the team. And I know Adira and Braden and I can like to applaud their efforts in Vancouver, a first-class group of folk. This pie chart represents the network-wide spending we will go on forward with. Now, if you show the next slide, please, Graham. This actually contrasts the expenditures in year 1 on the right-hand side and year 2 on the left-hand side. And as you can see, as contracts were signed between the institutions, as the individual projects were launched, an increasing amount of total dollars and an increasing fraction of the funding was directed toward the support of the research groups. Indeed, the management administration fundings were a larger component in the first year, represented by a not dissimilar total number value, but were important in the launching of the national network. And again, considerable expenditures in first year, which I think have now reached steady state for the support of stakeholder engagements. And again, just to emphasize, this is a key part of CanSOLVE CKD, the patient engagement. And then finally, supplies, materials, and this is growing as, in fact, the programs, curriculum involvement, knowledge translation, patient engagement, those components grow as, in fact, that represents growth within the individual core programs within CanSOLVE CKD. So I think that serves to give an overall highlight of the financial expenditures that describe the activities of CanSOLVE CKD.
Great, thank you, Jim. And I guess, thank you to the whole network, but specifically this Funders Forum update is really our commitment to take seriously you, our funders, and we've sent you the document, and there's a much more detailed overview of everything, but we really think that it comes alive in a slightly different way if we have the opportunity to discuss this with you, quote unquote, in person, the best that we can in a country of this size with multiple time zones and everything else, and mindful of the budget of spending too much money flying all over the place. So I wanted to make sure that we had a chance to answer any questions, review any of the material. Thank Graham and Grace for putting together the information in a way that was so digestible for all of us, and Jim and Michael and all of the people that have been working, as well as Heather and others that are in this room that you can't see because the screen's not wide enough, but to ask you, our partners, and open up the floor to you for questions. Can I do that? So all of you have now been unmuted by Graham. So please, we can also ask you individual feedback if that's easier to email us afterwards, that this commitment to do this at least once every 6 to 9 months to make sure that you all know where we're at. We do take seriously, and we don't want to abuse your time, but we certainly want to make sure that it's a chance for you to have good conversations.
Adira, it's Nancy. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Thanks, Nancy.
How are you?
Very well, thanks.
Sorry,
Just
Sorry I
great.
came on late.
That's okay.
Could we get back the slide, the pie chart slide for the financials?
Yeah. Graham's just going to put those up. There you have it in a split screen, I believe. Nope, or not. Go ahead. Which one did you want?
Curious. Yeah, that's perfect. I'm curious about the yellow, and how the supply side of things, the combined cost of supplies, educational materials and services, study supplies for sites, and survey costs, how that's different, and how that's why, and how that's broken out between the management side of things and the research. Is it are the purple and the teal, are they salary costs and that's it?
Nancy, I'm going to ask Grace, our finance manager, to take your question. Grace?
Hi, Nancy. So the supplies, materials, and services are substantially research, while the purple is the compensation cost of research staff trainees.
Okay.
It's a strict,
Okay.
I think it's a strict adherence to some of the CHR nomenclature.
Okay, wonderful, thanks.
Welcome. Other?
Adira, it's Mike here. I just wanted to offer for anyone on the phone, if anyone has any questions about the patient engagement component of CanSOLVE, I'm more than happy to answer questions on that topic too.
Great, thanks. I was offering you up anyway, but thank you for that.
I will take advantage of the silence. It's Nancy again. Michael, if you'd like to maybe say in your words what your experience has been and how you feel you've been engaged with this network. Has it been positive or has it been trying? I mean, I heard some of the feedback at the face-to-face meeting around some of the administration, but just your own personal experience would be really great to hear. For sure.
Well, thank you for a nice, easy question to start with. The experience for me has been, I don't even know if there's a superlative to explain it, but it's just been amazing to me. Research is something that as a patient, I just assumed happened. I had no idea how it happened, but new stuff came along from time to time, and you just were happy for it. As a patient, you don't really think about the process really. So to get to be invited into like right from the priority setting exercise through to now being on a patient lead on a project has been invigorating, quite frankly. My wife's family are all a bunch of scientists, and I'm always happy to tell them at Christmas how many times I've been published this year, because I'm now in the race. But yeah, you know, all joking aside, the experience has been amazing. I can't. I mean, there's obviously logistical challenges, and the core team has been unbelievable in mitigating those types of things for us to be able to go to meetings all over the country. We've been to Halifax, we've been to Vancouver, and places in between. And like, it's challenging travel for people that are on, especially on dialysis, which I am. So the core team has been amazing to be able to enable all of that. And in terms of the research, it's a lot of learning. It's not for everyone, I would say, but the people that I have had the pleasure of working with have been nothing short of amazing, and really encouraged. We encourage each other, I guess, is the way we're just sort of all holding each other up and trying to figure our way through it. And there's just not been a bad experience for me in the entire process.
Thanks for that, Michael.
Yeah.
Hi, it's Liz from the Kidney Foundation. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
We can.
Okay. So my question is both for Adira and Heather, and also Mike. But as we charge into year 3 or 3.5, or what are you most looking forward to for the network?
I think, well, I'll start and I'll let Heather join in. I think like all things in evolution, we're kind of at a really interesting break point where there will be studies with some preliminary results. There'll be some rebirthing of some core infrastructures. I think you are beginning to hear, feel, and see the change in culture. We were on a call with a group of people the other day, and there was a guy on the East Coast going, if you don't live, like no one in Newfoundland does any research, how come we don't hear about it? And it was like, oh, okay, so we've got parts of the world, parts of the country that aren't, the patients don't feel like that they have access, and with their voices and with some of the clinicians and researchers on the line, I think we can change that. So I think year 3 is kind of the beginning of the real change, because it does take a lot. This is like moving, you know, it's like a giant cargo ship, and, you know, we can be the little mouse that roared, but like it's really hard to move the ship around. And I think we've just been doing that. And so what I'm looking forward to in year 3 is that collation or coalescence of all the various activities. The Crescent program is, as you know, Liz, is finally coming, you know, where we've got the patients at each of the different meetings, where we actually have them now sitting on the panel to actually evaluate the applicants. Like, there are a number of things that we've done that just took some time to put into place, but now that they've been done, I think that really changes a lot. We have true incorporation of Indigenous values and beliefs into all of what we do, which is all part of Truth and Reconciliation. So I think we're fulfilling that mandate in a way that we should all be proud but not complacent about, and that requires ongoing work. And, you know, we've had some course correction in a number of studies, but have managed to course correct in terms of the stem cell project that's had to be modified, but that's okay. And everybody is committed to getting it done. So I think that it's the beginning of the acceleration phase, because it took a lot of work. And I think, you know, for Nancy and CHR, I'm not sure if people appreciate how much groundwork is required in the context of a huge pan-Canadian network to get it off the ground. So we've learned a lot. We've got lots of lessons that we would love to impart to others, but really see it as a transition year. Happy to have Heather add to that.
All I would add is that I think now that we're in year 3, where truly all systems go, And I've promised Grace that we will catch up in our spending starting this year, which is really exciting. It took a while for us to get going, but we're truly all systems go now. And I'm also looking forward to great things coming out of our curriculum working group. This started off as a couple of modules, and it's really taken on a life of its own. So stay tuned for some great things, including our Indigenous learning pathway and some other elements that Adira talked about a bit earlier, but great things to come out of that committee.
And, you know, believe it or not, we're already talking about sustainability and CanSOLVE 2.0 and what does that look like? And, you know, because it's year 3, and if we don't start to think about it now, it will be the end, and we'll have to be putting in new grants. And so I think it's, you know, it's very exciting. I think this year is our exciting kind of rev up year.
And I would just add one thing, that at the beginning, 2.5 years ago, we were doing patient-oriented research. We had to make a conscious effort, but now it's just part of what we do. And we have patient partners on all of our committees. We have patient partners beside us in all the work that we do, and patient partners leading a lot of the work that we do. So I think we're not so much doing patient-oriented research anymore. It's just part of what we do. So that's really a big step forward in the culture change.
And Liz, it's Mike here. If I can just add a little bit to that, and it's sort of extending on what Adira said, but I'm really excited for starting to see results. The formation stage is a necessary step, but there's been frustration expressed by a number of patients because, you know, it doesn't look like much is going on, but in the background, the core team has been working extremely hard to build that foundation. So for me, it's exciting. What we got involved in was to be involved in research projects. So now we're actually getting to that, and that, to me as a patient that could potentially benefit from some of this, or people that I've known for many years on dialysis could benefit them. That's the part that really energizes me.
Yeah, and I guess just to complement that, Mike, the education for all of us is that our timelines as researchers, we have accepted over time that it's okay to take a long time. But I think what's good is that we're also understand, and the patients are learning and the patients' families are learning, that it's important that there's a lot of planning that goes into any research to make it safe and appropriate, and that you answer the question the right way with the right methods. That being said, there's also a feeling that we all get about the importance of not standing still and accepting delays the way we have. And so there's a nice balance between, you do have to plan, you have to ask the right question, you've got to have the right methods. But once you have all that, how do we help make the research, you know, get conducted and the administrative stuff be a little bit more facile. So that's what that's part of changing the culture of research as well. And that's something that the institutions, Michael Smith, CIHR, UBC, the various foundations, we can all work with you together on getting that message out.
Thanks, everyone. That was awesome.
Great. Some of our industry partners, I believe, are also on the line, and just without calling out your specific names, I'm just curious your thoughts or if you have any questions. Well, you can always ask them privately.
It's good. Thank you very much. Very helpful.
Great, thanks. Rebecca, did you have any questions or thoughts?
Just on just to credit on the patient engagement, I think the network has set a new standard for patients and caregivers as partners. So, so that's been, I think, a huge achievement so far. And I like the way that Heather, that you stated, it's not an initiative any longer. It's the way we do business, and so it's really exciting to be part of the network. With respect to the budget, how do you see it projecting to the end of year 6? Like, do we have enough? Are we running out early? what are your projections going into the final year?
What does my crystal ball say? Well, some of the initiatives that we've taken on over the past 2.5 years didn't exist as part of our early planning. Our Indigenous learning pathway, for example, was kind of on the radar as Module 4 a couple of years ago. It's really taken on a life of its own, and something that should benefit people well beyond CanSOLVE to Diabetes Action Canada and beyond. And today we're actually getting our notifications for the SPORE Summit in November, and we've seen two of our 8 submissions so far taken up as oral presentations, both within our IPERT Council. So this is fantastic. We will be needing to look for additional funds to develop some of these initiatives like the learning pathway. But as far as our projects go, I think we're pretty well set. That said, as Adira mentioned earlier, we're starting to think about sustainability and what CanSOLVE 2.0 looks like and what we'll need to keep this big machine going.
Yeah. And in fairness, like the only way that, I mean, to me, the great value of the SPORE initiative was to galvanize the community across the country to work together, both as in the interest of kidney health and disease, but also in terms of sustaining research and being innovative in the way that we raise money. I think that that is sustainable and that will help us to leverage. So I don't anticipate a specific shortfall for what we've planned for. I think it's more the expectations of the other stuff that people are getting excited about that we might not have planned for, that we need to make sure doesn't fall away. But again, I'm quite confident that the way that we've organize this, that we should be able to attract varieties of fundings from various places. And people are being very, not creative in a positive way, that when there are opportunities to apply within a province or to CAHR for some of the innovative grants and things like that, that they're taking that and that's actually leveraging resources so that we can do a 2-for-1. So I think we're going to be okay dollar-wise. More importantly, I'd like to make sure that we've got lots of money in the bank going forward for the next part. Gloria,
Thank you.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, great.
You pretty much answered my question. I was going to ask about, work to leverage within the existing infrastructures in each of the provinces with the renal agency. We're obviously working with PHSA and the ministry and connecting with CanSOLVE and maybe speaking to, the BC experience and also maybe other jurisdictions, what they're doing to create that sustainability.
I think each province is set up quite differently, and so each one is working with their renal networks, agencies, strategic networks to try and see what they can do to leverage things. And there are different abilities. It's in-kind contributions, it's actual dollars. But I think that what I'd like to do in my spare time is actually create a document that describes the different way that the different provinces have actually leveraged CanSOLVE, because that would be, I think, be very instructive. If we've learned anything, I can tell you the diversity across Canada, both university and provincial health system-wise, is most apparent when one tries to negotiate all of these things. And I think that's a really important learning for all of us. Not only not one size fits all, but like not even one method of one size fits all. So who you talk to and how you talk to them, and that you have a good relationship with the Ministry of Health or not, will impact who and how you navigate the system. So I think that's really important, because if we're trying to change the culture and change the way that we do all this work and care with and for patients, then we're going to have to understand all that complexity. But thank you for the question. I'm relatively conscious that in some parts of the country it is 7:45 at night, at least in Ontario and Quebec, and later you're further east than that. So I just want to be mindful of people's time. Any other questions that people have? Michael Smith. Sorry, you come up as Michael Smith, so that's how Michael Smith Health Research Foundation.
Hi, Adira. Hi, Heather, and others. It's Bev and Manira here. So don't take our silence as not being actively interested. We are very interested and want to commend you for keeping funders in the loop, not just today but ongoing. It's a breath of fresh air. We're listening and talking between ourselves about the exciting stuff that you're doing with regard to patient engagement and you know, on review panels and so on. I just wonder about that whole study of patient engagement. So there's patients being involved in the research itself that you're doing, but there's the whole idea of the research on patient engagement. I think you are really leading in that whole area of how people are involved on peer review, for example, and lots of us could learn from that. So just opportunities to learn from you about what's working, how it's working, so that it's available to others. Any thoughts on that?
So Nicholas Fernandez, who's based in Montreal, who is A, a patient, and B, an educator, a PhD educator in patient engagement, is working on a curriculum with CIHR and us that helps to describe some of this and is doing research on the most effective ways to engage people in the different activities. For example, inviting 10 patients to a network, a visioning exercise on what should research look like in Canada in terms of a structure for clinical trials. You can't just invite people to a meeting. There needs to be a lot of discussion beforehand about what is a clinical, like you have to educate people around what things are before they actually come. And so these are the sorts of things that we're learning, but and we'll be sharing in both publications as well as this curriculum development. So there is some work to be done, and happy to talk offline and connect you with Nicholas as well, because he's done some amazing work.
That would be great, thank you. And especially around the review process. That's very, very exciting work. So congratulations.
Yeah, no, it's the patients have been very, very vocal about why are we doing this, why are we doing certain studies, and in Crescent, in selecting the candidates and giving feedback on the lay summaries, for example, about how pathetic they are, and could they please actually, no, it's fantastic. Yeah. Like it's very sobering, and it's very educational for all of us. So.
Yeah. Lay summary work is hard. It's really hard. Yeah. And Bev, I'll just add to what Adira is saying with an example from our Research Operations Committee. And this has been set up as kind of a peer review panel for CanSOLVE with people from outside the network and within the network, including 4 of our patient partners who've sat side by side with our researchers and other members, excuse me, to review each of our research projects. And this has really been an excellent experience all around and given some good feedback for our researchers.
That's great. Love to hear more about that. We'll connect offline.
Great,
for
thanks.
Sure.
Michael McCormick, I think it's only appropriate that I perhaps give you the last word. So I will ask perhaps you to maybe close it out. I appreciate that this is not the best venue to have 20 people and asking questions. It is the best we can do in this moment. If you can email us any of your outstanding questions or stuff, we'd be happy to answer them. But and before I go off, I'll ask, I'll thank everybody in the core team in Vancouver and Heather for her leadership of the core team, and Graham for all the work he does to make everything so understandable with the slides. But Michael and Kathy and Mary Bocage for your leadership of the Patient Council, and maybe Michael as the spokesperson for the patient group today, if you wouldn't mind just closing out, that would be great.
Sure. Thanks, Adira, and thanks for the presentation. It's always great to see these things. As much as we're involved, it's a ton of information. So I try, and I know many patients try to make time for these sort of higher level discussions, if you were, and yeah, I'm always amazed at how much we've actually done. Certainly now I'm starting to see things about getting consulted on my experience with patient engagement. So not my medical experience, but my recent experience. And I think that's amazing. I think that's a real credit to what this network is doing and how groundbreaking it is. And I think it's really, I know it's not our primary reason of being, but I do think it is incumbent on us to spread the word as much as we can, because I think patient involvement in research and really all aspects of medical care is changing the system for the better. So I thank everyone for all your hard work, the core team and the funders for enabling the work to be done.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, everybody, for being on.
Have a good night.
Have a good night.
Have a
Take
good
care.
night.